Hey guys, I'm Mark,
I'm Alon.
and welcome to another episode of The Next Man Up. Hey, big guy, what's going on, man?
Yeah, man, just enjoying life. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank
All right.
you.
Good,
So you kind of
Grooving?
grooving, yeah, grooving to the beats over there.
Again, you don't want to hear me sing, so
No, just stick to rap.
yeah, I'm gonna stick to rap. Oh man, so what's good? What's happening? What's the agenda today?
Oh, the agenda today, at least to get us started, is another article. Can you believe I found another article that has some controversy to it, maybe that we can
Not in
draw
this day and
out,
age.
or
Not in this day and age.
or aligns at least with this topic that we're talking about. I know you've had a chance to peruse the article. I think this could be a really good discussion.
Yeah, I agree, man.
So I'm excited to get into it. So for our listeners, just a little bit of backstory. I came across an article that was an interview, really, by an organization called Fatherly that just puts out a bunch of quote unquote dad content. But they were interviewing a guy by the name of Dr. Leonard Sax, who I wasn't familiar with at the time. And the title of the article is Dr. Leonard Sax on Why Boys Are Unmotivated. So I'm like, oh, okay, you got my attention right off the bat, just based on what you're talking about. And as I perused this article, which we'll make available in the show notes for listeners to access, I was just struck by how pointed Dr. Sax is in his commentary about how parents and culture have let our kids down, and in particular in this article have let our boys down, and as a result, we're paying the consequences today.
Yeah. You said pointed. I would say he was more like, he was more like a laser-guided missile.
Yeah.
With a scalpel attached at the end. Yeah, he was. This dude was really going in on it.
Yeah, I know you had some interesting reactions to that, and we'll get into that in a second. But after reading this article, which is actually it's pretty light, it's thin.
It's not a long article. You're right. It's pretty thin.
No, it's pretty thin. Well, unbeknownst to me, a friend of mine who is a fan of what we're doing here in the show sent me a podcast to listen to, which was a longer interview between Dr. Sax and the show host, Eric Metaxas. And so I listened to that. It was a 2-part thing, and we can also make that available in the show notes for listeners to follow up on. And in that episode, it gave Dr. Sax more time to expand on his premise and his concerns. And
I haven't listened or seen.
Yeah, and that's okay. We don't have to go into that. But in addition to that, I've also gotten a couple of his books from the library that I'm starting to read. And I guess what captivates me is he is a voice out there in culture, certainly coming from a scientific, both medical and psychological. He's a medical doctor as well as a doctor in psychology. And so he's got all this clinical experience that he's bringing to bear, plus all of the research out there just about how we are failing our boys because we're not engaged, or because we're not preparing them during the transition from boyhood to adulthood. And, it could not fit more square into the conversation that we're trying to be about.
Yeah. His the idea of where he's going, I totally understand, and I can, even as I read the article, and we'll get into it here, like you said, in a few seconds. The crux of what he's saying is like, yeah, man, yeah, dude, we've dropped the ball when it comes to raising our kids. We dropped the ball as a society when it comes to raising our, like in our case, we're talking about young boys. Yeah, we've dropped the ball in raising them.
Yeah,
and we got to do something. And it's good. For me, it's like, okay, it's good to know that there's strong voices out there, and it's not just a hunch, but it is something that has been researched, like this guy's been doing. It is something that there's lots of data out there to support this idea,
Right.
Which is cool, and I can appreciate. I didn't jump in all the way as you did. You started listening to podcasts. You went and got books. You
Well,
bought
you know
the
me.
T-shirt.
I got.
You've had coffee with the guy, probably.
That's next week.
No, I'm just messing. But I'm interested to hear more of what he says and where his ideas are stemming from.
You touched on something that I think that really resonated with me as well. We've shared our stories here. I got into this based on a feeling of something was missing in my life.
Yeah.
I didn't go through the research. I wasn't reading books about the scientific evidence. I just knew that there was an element of my transition from boy to man that was missing, and I wanted to do more and better, as we've discussed. But this gave me a lot of encouragement and affirmation that, number one, that I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's just our generation and the generation that we're raising up, we have not experienced an intentional and healthy guidance from boy to man. And now we have all this scientific evidence and research to prove it.
Yeah.
And also to document the consequences of what happens when we as a culture, we fail to properly grasp the importance of these transitions.
And the reward, if we do, like, the reward is opposite. Our boys, being raised and grown and walked along with into this idea of a picture of a man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And man, it gives me hope. But at the same time, I agree with you. It's like, dude, like, bro, there's something wrong.
There's something.
We can't look away now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
We have to go, all right, there's definite evidence that supports this idea that something is wrong when it comes to the idea of rite of passage.
Right. Yeah. So the article starts off with boys being boys is okay unless they never become men.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that. The quote that we often come back to is, if we don't initiate our boys to become men, then what?
They'll burn the village down.
They'll burn the village down.
Yeah.
So whoever the old African was that coined that proverb had it figured out.
Yeah.
Sax goes on to say that there's been a steep decline in the motivation of young men, which he blames on video games, over-medication, and a rise in parents who don't want to be true authority figures. I know you had kind of an interesting reaction to that one. Go ahead and share your thoughts.
For me, yeah, definitely, because that's exactly what my head was like. It was like, oh, interesting. Look, I like the overall theme of what he's trying to say. We're missing it. We're missing the target that we're trying to aim for, or not aiming for. We're just completely missing it.
Right.
But I don't think how we aim. How we get on target is to point it at what I would call a symptom. Look, man, I think the very core of it all is that we as fathers, because this is what we're talking about. When I say fathers, I'm meaning parents, but I do mean parents. But since we're doing, next man up, let me aim at fathers. We as fathers have the obligation of looking at our sons and going, look, I need to figure who you are. I need to figure that out. Who are you? And then I need to come alongside of you and help raise you in the space that you're at. and help you develop your own person into your own man.
Yeah.
You know, and but because like as fathers, for whatever reason, we look at our sons and go, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't get it, or like, you know, I didn't have a good father, or, you know, my father, this is how he raised me, and you know, this is how I'm going to try to raise you, but it's not connecting because your son is not you, or, you know, like for whatever reason we're missing it, and we as fathers go, I need to step back because I can't touch this. It's the unknown, and we fear the unknown.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I get it, man. As a dad, I feared my kids. Each one that popped out, I looked and goes, oh my gosh, like, what am I gonna do? You know? Actually, it was like, man, you look like an alien, because it was just a weird creature, you know. But you know, I engaged and I engaged the fear, but we fear the unknown. So we look at our kid, we look at our son, and we go, I don't know how to raise you, and we back up, right? And our sons, though they're looking at us like, dude, raise me. And we're not there, they become kind of like what I said before, the Jack Sparrows of their own lives.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there with this compass that's spinning around. It's only going to go towards what they want, right?
Right.
And what they want is going to manifest into whatever. It can manifest into anything. So when he's talking about, like, you know, video games, it's like, well, take video games out and replace it with basketball. Take basketball out, replace it with dancing. Take dancing out, replace it with robotics. Take robotics out and replace it with whatever that kid is like into. And that kid is gonna go after that thing because that's what fills him, right? And we end up having a kid who does, like me, I was dancing 8 hours a day because that's what I was into.
Right.
That you know, I found something that fed me, that fueled me. You know, for a while there, I was reading books. Like it became my world because it became an escape out of the stuff that I was like dealing with. Fighting was a thing for a while, you know what I mean? So it was like, dude, all I did was get into fights and whatever. But, you know, you take video games and replace it with whatever, and you got the same thing. The idea is not that the video game is an issue, or depends on who you are and where your perspectives are, but that's just a symptom. If your son is like continually going after video games, it's not, well, you have to think, one, it could necessarily not be a bad thing. Maybe that's their passion. Maybe they're passionate about graphics and designing and figuring out technology and whatever. And, you know, the video game that they're playing just seems to be something that they're connected to. I don't know. I don't know your kid. This goes back to, you need to know your son, right?
Right.
You need to know your son. But it's also like, it could be something where it's like, dude, yeah, you are playing that like completely all the time and whatever, and it's taking over your life and you're not motivated. Like I said, take it out and put anything else in, and you might have the same problem. But that's just a symptom. The symptom is a symptom of something much deeper, which is there's a gap between fathers and sons. And fathers, we have to engage our sons. We have to see that they are a human being that we have been blessed to raise. And we have to see it as that and go, you know what, my job is to engage you. Even if you're weird to me, and I don't get you, and our personalities are completely different, my job is to engage you and raise you, and I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to build you. And if your passion seems to be what you're after all the time, well, then let me help you shape that passion and be about that passion. But yet still, at a higher level, I'm going to raise you to be a man. You know what I mean? And when that relationship gets built and we see something better in society, but like, dude, this right here, what he's talking and aiming for, I get the overall arching idea, but like pointing it at just like video games, it's like, dude, come on, man. That's and even like, you know, he goes into medication. Yeah. You know, he talks about medication, and it's like, look, man, I've been on the spectrum of having to take meds as a kid. All right. You know, from ADHD to whatever, you know, we live in an imperfect world. We live in a broken world, and we're not perfect. And so we're going to have issues. So some kids need medication. Some kids, it's like, dude, it helps them even out. And I get it. But then there's other times where it's like, you know what, dude, maybe the medication wasn't what the kid needs. It goes back to, you need to know your kid. You need to know your kid. Not every kid's the same. Yeah. You know what I mean? Not every person's the same. And let's even go deeper. Not every human being is the same. And we have to look at it that way, and it presses us as parents to go, you know what? I need to get beside my boy. Like, I mean, one of my kids, I won't put my kids on blast, but one of my kids, there was a time where people thought that this child needed medication, but I knew my child, and I was like, knowing my child, I don't think my child needs medication. I think it's other things. I think it's like, they were saying he or she is spastic in the middle of class. And it's like, well, you know what? I did shove my child in a room with 40 other kids with one teacher. And I expect my kid to be okay and focused and whatever. Probably not. No, my kid doesn't need medication. I think what my kid needs is a new school, where my kid can get some more attention and be focused, and and it turned out that's exactly what my kid needed. Medication doesn't have to be the answer every time. We have to know our kid and our child and be able to say, this, son, daughter, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? What are you sensing? What's some things that are going on? And then be able to help them address that with support and care. Not like, dude, what you're doing with video games. You played video games and you're wrong. Dude, I remember played 3 days straight because I wanted to see how far Super Mario Brothers would work on the old Nintendo system when I was a kid. I played 3 days straight. I didn't sleep. Me and my wife's brother Ray, we played Super Mario Brothers for 3 days straight. We kept going through every level, and at level 8, it would reset and go back to level 1, just be a little tougher, right? And we just kept playing and playing. Dude, I turned out okay. Now, other kids, it might be a problem, but for me, it wasn't a problem. You know what I mean? Like, dude, we gotta rethink this whole thing, man. Anyway, I can talk about this.
Did we touch a nerve here or something?
Yeah, man. We need relationship, Mark.
Yeah.
We need relationship. Yeah. We are relational creatures, and we can't just discard that. Is basically what I'm getting at. We have to go back to relationship, and not every kid's the same. You know what I mean? So
later in the article, there's a statement that
you can talk now, Mark.
Yes, thank you. You can take a breath. Go ahead and take a bathroom break if you need it. There's a statement that says boys are disengaging, and as I was pondering that thought, it occurred to me that boys are probably disengaging because parents, specifically father, has disengaged. So without an engaged father, like Dr. Sax says, the boy is going to turn to something else to find his identity, to find his purpose, to find some place to be significant, some place to be somebody. And I think the disengagement is probably the first issue, within downstream side effects or symptoms that present themselves as video games or over medication, or there's a few other examples that he gives. Now, it's easier for me to jump on the ban the video game wagon and ban the medication wagon, just because of my experience and my perspective. I was never a gamer. So I never found my identity in that. And I also think maybe one of the distinctions that he would draw is the more violent and aggressive and unhealthy video games versus things that are just like innocent, like Mario Brothers, right? It was quote unquote innocent. Now,
sure.
So you and I,
sure.
You're not gonna have
depending on what side of the Bible Belt you lived on. You're running around saving a princess from a dragon-breathing fire
fair enough.
Magical land. Dude,
but
get away from it.
There was something.
Evil.
There was something to aspire to. I'm having a little fun with this, just because I haven't often disagreed in this context. I see some of these video games as promoting destructive behavior, and if you're in these games long enough, there's a distortion between game and reality, and what happens in the game tends to play out in reality. And so that's where I think maybe he's going, not to try to defend him or put words in his mouth. But you're right. If you are wrapped up in anything and you are finding your identity in that thing, and you're so focused that you can't see anything else, then it's not healthy.
No. And you know, listeners, if you're like, oh man, Alon doesn't see. Look, I get you, Mark. What you just said was important. Yeah. Do I agree that there are video games out there that are just way over the line when it comes to violence and even like sexual assault and
Grand Theft Auto is one that he uses in his literature.
Because you know what, and I remember talking about that at some of my speaking engagements when, you know, Grand Theft Auto first came out. I'm like, dude, you get points for beating up a prostitute. Like, we have to really reconsider what we're. And so I get that side of it.
Yeah.
My thing is like, we can't just point our finger just at that. Like, we have to go deeper.
Yeah.
You know, and so if we go deeper, we find out that there is a gap relationally in our families.
Yeah.
And we need to deal with that. And we'll, like, you know what? My son, he plays video games. There's a new game out, not new anymore, but Fortnite. He plays that 24/7, I feel. But when I look at my son and I say, son, you wanna hop behind the wheel of the car and start driving as he's got his permit, he'll leave that game and come hang out with dad.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, son, you want to go get some food and let's talk about life? He'll leave that game. Hey, son, you want to go beat up your dad in basketball because he can't play you anymore because you're just too good? He would jump at the chance of that. You see what I'm saying?
Right,
like, if we don't engage, like, can we blame our kids for going towards another water hole to get a drink when our water hole is closed off?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I think that's right. There's further deep in the article, Sax goes on to say, most parents collapse in horror at the idea that they should shut off games, or in his recommendation is turn your games off or limit the time. But his point is that most parents seize up or react with fear in that suggestion or recommendation. And I tell you, I don't understand that. I came into parenting with a very good example and with clear ideas, and I've loosened up a bit, and I've learned a lot just from on-the-job experience. But I came into parenting with every intention to be the parent, the adult, to play my role. So I don't understand the perspective of how parents can sort of cower away from that. Not that I'm ridiculing it. I just it hasn't been my experience. So I don't know how people can come to that conclusion, but clearly people are.
Yeah.
Right? Disengagement, passivity, fear of being an authority figure in your kids' lives. Like that's what a lot of people are wrestling with. And you know, Sax pulls that out.
You know, it's interesting because, like, I mean, you know, we started out saying that, you know, there's no real manual for being a parent, right? There's no manual for being a parent.
Right.
And so, like, you jump into this unknown, let's say you just decide, you know, you have a kid and you're like, I'm going to parent this kid. You jump into the water to realize there's no lifeboat. Like, you just gotta swim. Right. And so I think there's that feeling, that sense going on, coupled with, dude, I feel like as parents, we're challenged in every single way from every piece of society on how we raise our kids.
Yeah.
Like, it's, and if you can imagine, like, school tests you on how you raise your kids, right? You have social media pressing you on how you raise your kids. You have other parents who think they know, but the older I get, I realize I don't know jack. But they think they know how to raise kids, and they press you, and you got family pressing you, you know, from old ways, like, this is how we did it, and, you know, they're pressing you on it, or this is how we're doing it. And as a parent, you can feel like these walls have these walls have like needles on them, and they keep closing in, and you put your hands out and you press and you get pricked and it hurts, and you're like, you know, so you're hesitant to push back, and now you're like, you know, you're anxious. It's almost traumatic. You know, it's almost traumatic, and you feel like anytime that you feel like you want to do something as a parent, that you're going to be tested, you're going to be pressed, you're going to be ridiculed, you're going to be scrutinized. It's like, I can get why some parents would be like, I don't want to have that conversation with my kid. I can't do this right now.
Yeah.
I'd rather go do something that I'm comfortable with. I'd rather go buy another gun. Like, I'd rather go buy another car. I'd rather go fix the house. I'd rather go, hang out with friends. I get it. I understand. But that doesn't mean that we still shouldn't press in.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the hard part.
That idea of just settling, retreating from the hard, the difficult, the potentially fear-inducing, that intersects with a lot of the work that I do with individual clients and in the coaching space. And what I hear you say, and what I see in my own life and see in the lives of others, is that it's often easier to just do the easier thing. Yep. Right? It's kind of a dumb way to say it, but
no, it's not dumb. That's right on.
It's easier to take the easy way out, which presents in this context of parenting as I'm just not going to talk about it, or I'm going to let boys be boys because I figured it out, they'll figure it out, or I'm going to go do something. I'm too tired right now. That's another challenge that I know parents face, is just this fatigue.
We do face that. We're tired.
Right. So we just settle for the easier.
Yeah.
And I think, if nothing else, what I hear coming through in at least in the platform that Dr. Sax has is, don't settle.
Yeah,
you have to engage. You have to be strong. You have to be the adult, the parent. And look, we're not advocating pulling out the paddles and going back into the 1950s or the 1800s. What we're saying is, be the adult. Number one, the parental figure, not the best friend.
Yeah.
And number two, be engaged. I love how you present it as, you have to know your kid.
Yeah.
You have to be in relationship with them. You have to understand them. You have to engage.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. And, we're not saying that, at least for me, I agree with you. We cannot be the best friend first, is where I would say. I want to be a friend of my kid. Because friendship is good,
right?
Friendship is relationship, right?
Right.
But speaking fathers and sons here, I am my son's dad first.
Yeah.
And there's times, man. Even today, we had some time together today, and there was things that I had to bring up in the conversation that was hard, but and there was parts of me that were like, oh man, I don't want to do this right now. This is a battle. I don't want to battle right now.
Right.
But because I care for him and I love him and I want to see him grow. I have to present this stuff to him. The hard stuff, the challenging stuff, the struggles. I have to engage him in it. But it's cool because I don't know, for me, I find let's have a conversation, not a fight. Let's have a conversation and be able to disagree without one of us looking at each other like you are not needed in my life. You know what I'm saying? Let's have a conversation and still present that, we're going to have a talk, but you are my son and I am your dad. You know what I mean? Let's have that common ground and respect for each other.
Yeah.
In a sense. But let's talk.
Yeah.
And normally when I do that, man, there's times where both of us have walked away from a conversation upset, at the same time, or just one of us,
Right.
But I find it's always cool because we come back and go, okay, I thought about what you said, and I could see where you're coming from. And for my son, it's been cool because he's been able to walk away and think, and then come back and go, okay, I don't necessarily agree with your way and what you want me to do and what you're challenging me in or your perspective. I don't necessarily agree, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to engage because there's a relationship there. I can see you love me and that you care for me and you want the best for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's a win.
That is a win.
That is a win, but you can't You can't have a win if you don't engage in a battle. And the more battles you walk away from, the more conversations, I should say, you walk away from, the more engagement that you walk away from, the greater the gap and the harder it is, like, to get that kind of relationship with your kid.
So the word that keeps coming to mind, listening to your story, is trust. Yeah. You know, like, you've earned the right for your son to trust you, even if he doesn't get it, or doesn't agree with it, or doesn't want to. You know, those could be a couple different things. But because of your engagement, he trusts you. And he's willing to lean into that trust instead of the maybe the way the culture is pulling him, or his heart, or the testosterone that's flooding through his body at this age. You
and
know,
that's not saying that it's a win all the time, man. Like,
I know.
My son is my son. He's his own person. You know what I'm saying? But man, dude, like, we're not going to get anywhere if we don't jump into that engagement. That's
what makes those encounters rewarding. You know, there's no guarantees.
No guarantees.
Not only is there no operator manual or instructional manual, there's no guarantees that all of this investment and effort is going to pay off. Now, I tend to think the odds are way better that it will pay off if you make the investment, then it will pan out if you don't.
Yes, I agree with that.
But there's no guarantee. No. Ultimately, we are raising our kids to be able to make their own choices, and they may not be ours.
Yep, absolutely.
You know, I mentioned earlier in this discussion that I got a couple books from the library and did a little bit more research, and there's an interesting statement that Sax makes in one of his books. It's called Why Gender Matters, and it's toward the back as he's just kind of wrapping up his conclusions throughout the book. But this just jumped off the page to me. He says, more than in any other realm, in the transition to adulthood is where our society now lets kids down. We offer daughters and sons little guidance about what it means to become a woman or a man. Yeah. And when I read that, I'm like, look, man, that is what we are about here. Yeah. You know, we call it the next man up. We're trying to draw on ancient wisdom from initiation and rite of passage and all of that. But at the core, it really starts with this idea of engaging your kids and seeing this as a transition and a role that we play for a period of time. And so, you know, I mentioned a few minutes ago that we're parents, right? Mm-hmm. We're the adults in this relationship until those kids cross that threshold, transition into adulthood, and then we can become friends. And if things have played out in the way that we hope, in the way that is most likely, we'll end up with a good relationship. Yes, because we put the time in up front. We're getting the return on investment, to use finance speak. Absolutely. But without that investment, it's a gamble, right?
Absolutely. Man, I can't. You said it right. I have nothing to add to that. I agree.
Well, it was an encouragement to me to realize that, and I knew this, but to realize that there is another voice out there. Agreed. There's another voice that comes at this with the perspective of scientific research that can prove the good and the bad that comes from disengagement or lack of preparing our kids to roll into adulthood, taking the easy path, you know. Anyway, it was a good encouragement, and I was.
Thanks for bringing it across the table.
I was affirmed.
Yeah. Even though I know just people are like, man, this guy's fiery on this podcast, because there's some things I disagree with, but no, it was a good read, man. It's a good read, and taking stuff from all sides of the table, ingesting and thinking through, and being able to state what resonates with me is beautiful. So thank you for bringing it across the table.
Yeah, it was a good topic. And, listeners, as you are processing this, listening to our conversation, maybe reading the article, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
We're not looking for consensus as much as we're looking for conversation and discussion. So if you've got reactions to the article, to something that we've said, maybe you're familiar with Dr. Sax from other work that you've experienced, we would love to hear from you. It's all captured in the outro, but just as a reminder, you can hit us up at feedback@thenextmanup.com.
All right.
All right, amigo. Until next time.
Next time, friend.
See ya. Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. We would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.